Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are joining me from. Thank you very much for taking time from your busy schedule to be with me this morning in this 1-hour webinar on application lifecycle management for the medical industry. My name is Hanna, and I'm happy to be with you for this 1 hour. Okay, let's get started here. If you have been in medical devices, you are very well aware of those standards from IEC or ISO or FDA, and every one of those standards, as you can see, is focusing on a specific area of the medical device development and manufacturing. We're not going to talk about all the standards in details. However, we are going to show you what ALM application lifecycle management tool or software or methodology should have in order to support those. These are some of the challenges that medical device companies meet because of those standards. Those standards require complete traceability of requirements from beginning to end. It requires also enforcement of mature and transparent methods and processes. You probably are familiar with those anyway. They'd like to see a demonstration of and documentation of adequate testing and risk management measures, and so on. Now, recently, if you're familiar with this, FDA has decided to change the approach of computer software validation, the CSV, which has been stated in the standards for years and years, into what they call the CSA, the Computer Software Assurance. And the reason is that FDA found out that the CSV processes take so long, takes much time, and people normally focus on documentation, and companies are so worried about the auditing process, and that's what they focus on, and without focusing on the real quality or the real testing. FDA has decided to come up with this, or to switch from CSV to CSA, and there was supposed to be a draft guidance that's supposed to come out end of 2020. Now it is planned to come out in 2022 for public comments. And the new draft is focusing on few things, but I put here in front of you the most important 3 things. They want to see people focusing on quality and testing as opposed to focusing on documentation. So they'd like to see also companies doing less scripted testing and more unscripted testing. Initially, they called it unscripted testing, but at later discussions at the FDA and the board and the people who are writing the draft, they decided to call it scenario-based testing as opposed to scripted testing. We're going to get into some of the details. And they want companies to focus so much on risk-based testing, which means not all features should be tested with the same level of rigor, but certain features that might have some impact on the patient, these need to be tested differently and more rigorously than other features that do not have impact on the patient. So this is basically what they are suggesting, and although FDA did not state those percentage exactly, but that's what Boston Scientific got, because Boston Scientific, as you can imagine, is one of the companies involved in the development of that draft. So they said low-risk features should be done ad hoc testing. You can imagine this is the first time we hear that FDA is talking about ad hoc testing. We never thought that could possibly happen. And then for those features that are medium risk and the medium risk that do not impact the patient, things like electronic records, electronic signatures, These are some examples. They want them to be tested as unscripted, and they say just leave the scripted testing the way that has been always done. Leave it for those high risk features. And if you look at those percentages, imagine, so they're suggesting that 70% of the testing should be done unscripted. Only 5% is going to be done scripted testing. In my opinion, those percentages wouldn't fly, because it all depends on the system and all depends on what features are low risk. What if I find only in my system there's only about 15% of the features that are low risk? So that's what I'm going to be doing ad hoc. What if I find that the high risk features are about 35%? Then that's what I'm going to be doing scripted. Okay. I'm not clear exactly how Boston Scientific came up with those numbers. Again, one more time, remember that draft is not out to the public yet, but many companies are involved in the development in the draft. And all what we're getting now is really what those companies are saying about what's going on in the discussion. Being involved myself in many of the standards committee before, I know how these discussions go. And if we are in the early stages of the development of a standard or a draft, then things can change quickly. I don't think this draft is still in the early stages, because it was supposed to be released out to the public, I believe, end of 2020. Now COVID delayed everything, then it was rescheduled to be released at end of 2021. Now we're approaching end of 2021. Now what I am hearing from companies involved in the process that it is going to be 2022. So I believe this standard, this draft is very much close to being a final draft. However, this is what we're hearing. So things may change, but I doubt that the discussion about ad hoc, unscripted, or scripted is going to change much. If those percentages have been mentioned in some of the meetings, then I suspect these will change possibly. All right, so this is what really the new CSA suggests from CSFE, focusing 80% on documentation and only 20% on testing, which in my opinion was terrible. In the opinion of anyone who's building systems, is terrible, because testing is really what guarantees that systems work. Testing is what guarantees that the software is doing what's supposed to be doing. And it is shame that in the computer system or computer software validation, we were focusing only about 20% of our effort on testing. Now they're saying in the computer software assurance, it's going to be flipped. So they want to see 80% focus on testing. Okay, of course. I would have expected this years ago. But again, remember, FDA required a lot of documentation. That's what companies were doing here. Now, Rommana ALM as an application lifecycle management tool actually supports everything the CSA requires. And I'm listing those things here not to tell you that you must buy Rommana ALM, but I'm kind of saying that when you are looking for an ALM tool for your systems, these are the kind of things you must be looking for. Okay. Now, Rommana ALM has what we call collaborative scenario development and validation. This is to support the concept of scenario-based / unscripted testing. So Rommana ALM, if you've been exposed to it, if you've seen it, has a concept of scenario-based development and testing, and it focuses so much on scenarios. In fact, everything in Rommana ALM is scenarios. And if you're doing Rommana ALM, if you're using it, then you have normal scenarios, you have abnormal or extreme scenarios, which we're going to be using later on to identify those features that are high risk versus low risk. And all these scenarios in Rommana ALM are reviewed through the collaborative review process that the tool supports. Okay. Now, when it comes to risk-based testing, the same scenario-based process suggests that all scenarios get ranked to either high, medium, or low based on these three factors. Frequency of occurrence, how often do we think that this scenario is going to happen in production, impact of failure, i.e. if this scenario would happen in production, what is the impact on everything else, not necessarily on the patient, because sometimes, as we said, the feature may not have much of a high impact on the patient, but it might have an impact on the operations itself. And of course, the probability of failure is something that Rommana ALM came up with, which is simply what are the chances that this scenario could possibly fail in production. All right, and Rommana ALM uses these three factors to calculate what's called the testing priority based on these three factors. And the testing priority is normally a number between 1.0 and the 3.0. And by the way, this feature of scenario-based and risk-based testing has been in Rommana ALM for the last 7 years now, before even FDA decides to go with the CSA. So you can easily sort the list of scenarios you have in Rommana ALM, and then decide on what you consider to be a high risk scenario versus low risk scenario, and based on that you can decide on what to test. Then the next step in Rommana ALM, that it has what we call a hybrid approach to testing, which means not all features, not all scenarios are going to be tested with the same level of rigor. In fact, we've been telling customers for so many years that if you got a scenario that has a very high priority for testing, that must be tested formally, i.e. you take it, you write test cases, you write a script, and so on. And the test case in Rommana ALM is a very formal test case. The lower risk scenarios, and again, if the number is between 1.0 to 3.0, then something in the range of 2.0 to 2.6 would be considered medium risk scenarios. Those will be tested informally by generating what we call exploratory or / ad hoc tests from Rommana ALM itself. And then the very low priority scenarios, like the 1.0 and the 1.3 and so on, we will take the scenarios and execute them directly without even generating ad hoc tests or exploratory tests or any kind of test. We will call this executing the scenarios. And sometimes when I talk to people, I say this is a disparate approach. And normally, yes, when you have low-level scenarios and you run out of time, that's what you do. So really, this hybrid approach to testing in Rommana ALM allows you to test different scenarios with different level of rigors. Now, keep in mind, as you can see, Rommana ALM applies the risk-based analysis on the scenario level, not on the feature level. I know the FDA requires that you take features and say, okay, this feature is a high level, this feature is a low risk, low level risk, and so on. But in my 40 plus experience with software engineering, I found this to be very difficult to sort out or classify features within a system to be high priority or low priority, or high risk or low risk. Why? Because the feature itself might have some of the scenarios of some or some of the situations that could possibly happen that are high risk, and other scenarios are low risk. So that's why we decided that Rommana ALM would do the risk analysis on the scenario level. Now, as I said earlier, in the CSA, FDA would like to see you focusing more on the test design process. And again, Rommana ALM in the formal testing process, when I even teach it to people, I show them the test design process in Rommana ALM, and I tell them, here are the steps, here are the scenarios, here are the reviews of the scenarios, the approval of the scenarios, and then now here are writing the test cases, and then the last step is writing the scripts. And I ask people all the time, I said, if you have a limited amount of time, which one of those steps would you spend most of your time? And everyone tells me, because it's a common sense, that you need to design your tests first. You may not have time to get to writing scripts at the end. That's why Rommana ALM allows you to design your test cases with the preconditions, the post conditions, the input and output. And then also Rommana ALM has an approach that you can derive negative tests, because we know people do not do much of negative tests. So we have a very systematic approach by which you can derive negative test cases from positive test cases. Okay, and that actually, when people do that, they produce quite a bit of negative test cases. But that's really the focus on the test design process as opposed to scripting. So if you do that, if you design your test cases, if you come up with a good amount of negative test cases, then you have done good. FDA also, in their CSA guidance, suggested that we focus much less on documentation. Remember, your requirement documents have to be very thorough, very detailed, has all the details there. And Rommana ALM from the beginning said you don't have to have a bulky requirement document anyway. Why? Because Rommana ALM supports the concept of models by which you can draw a model that describes a lot of details about the requirements without writing the text in the requirement itself. That's why requirements in Rommana ALM are brief. And if there is more details to the requirements, they are normally provided in a model. And models are things like decision tables or like activity diagrams. There are so many models within Rommana ALM. You can even create your own models that are not within Rommana ALM and add them, because those are all configurable by the user. Because there are other standards from IEC and the ISO that really are, and those are mostly for the medical device. If I go back to the previous slide, the first slide here, as I said here, the new CSA is mainly for manufacturing and quality systems, not for the device software. We have to be careful here. FDA is not relaxing the requirements that ISO or IEC or any other standards is enforcing. FDA itself has standards that have to do with the medical devices that have high impact on the patient, and those did not change. So what they suggested that the things that do not have impact on the patient, these are the systems that are going to go under CSA as opposed to CSV. All right. So as a result, we still have the device software that requires things that are very rigorous. So requirement management process in Rommana ALM, it enforces complete and detailed product requirements. Okay, if that's what you want to do, if you want to use Rommana ALM for a device software, then you'll find that you could really do all documentation you want, and you can document all kinds of requirements: hardware, firmware, software, quality, any performance, and any safety. All these are documented within Rommana ALM with all level of rigor. Rommana ALM also provide complete traceability of all the requirements to everything else: code modules, design components, test cases, and these are very straightforward requirements by all the standards. In Rommana ALM, you can define the relationship or the dependencies between different requirements. Okay, because the requirements do not exist there by themselves, but rather they relate to other requirements. So you can define those relationships, and within Rommana ALM, all the changes on the requirements are tracked through history. And if the change is major, meaning that it will create a new version of the requirement, then the change has to be reviewed and approved by the project team or the customer or whoever is supposed to approve. Of course, Rommana ALM has complete support of what we call approval authority, where you can specify for a given requirement who is supposed to review it, who is supposed to approve it, and if more than one person is supposed to approve it, then you can specify whether all of them must approve it or only one or two is enough. And if all of them must approve it, you can also specify the order in which they must approve it. Very detailed process for approval authority. All right, that's about requirement management. Now, Rommana ALM also has good support for risk management, and of course, risk is always there. Projects have risks, and those risks may be associated with requirements or not. When we say the risk is associated with a requirement, that means that there's something that could possibly happen that can hinder us from delivering this requirement. So that means that we have to document that risk. We have to document the mitigation strategies, and these mitigation strategies and the risk level is monitored throughout the process. That's all happening in Rommana ALM. As I said, this applies not only to functional requirements, but to safety requirements, to performance requirements. All requirements may have risk associated with them. Rommana ALM also has a component, and that's document management. And if you need to maintain good documentation within Rommana, you can have them either attach it to requirements or not. Electronic signatures is used within Rommana ALM for people to approve the requirements, as I just mentioned, or the documents. Okay. In Rommana ALM, you can certainly specify safety, reliability, and performance, and those are required by the standards. The nice thing about Rommana ALM, all requirements are treated seamlessly. The same level of rigor can be applied to any kind of requirements, whether the review process, the approval process, and so on, and the relationship between requirements and so on. All right, this is a picture that's showing you the different components that are supported by Rommana ALM. What you see in the middle here is the Rommana repository, which is simply a SQL Server database, and here are the different components that supports that. There's requirement management or user story if your project is agile. Here are the document management, all the test design and test management is here. The collaboration components here where people collaborate to review and approve requirements. And then if anything change in the requirements is handled here. But what's important here is that all these components, they're not separate pieces of software. They are just a number of components in one fully integrated tool. I'm going to have some time now. I think I still have some time to show you a demo, a brief demo of how Rommana ALM does all that. If you have not seen it before, you are more than welcome to sit for the demo. Just wanted to let you know that you can go anytime on the Rommana software website and request a free trial for any of the components or for the complete Rommana ALM here. You can get a free trial for 60 days for up to 3 people of your team. And if you need more time to use and play with the software, you can let us know, and we'll certainly extend your trial if we see that you're actually using it. All right. So now allow me please to go and log into one of the Rommana sites. Rommana, of course, is a fully complete web-based application, which means you know when you access it, it's going to be a website right now. So if your company would acquire Rommana, then your site would be your company name or whatever name you choose, .rommana.com. So this is one of the sites we use for demos and testing and things like that. So I'm going to log in here, and I'm going to log in as a product owner, project manager, Scrum Master, project manager, whoever. So on the left here, you'll see all the systems or all the applications, if you will, or all the products that are within that site. And we just, for the sake of example, we put different types of systems here just to let you know that those systems are not related at all. And when you highlight any one of those, you can see on the right here the different projects that are associated with this product. All right, so we got a number of projects here. Don't mind the name of the projects here. That seems to be releases, but they're not really releases. They're simply what release we were planning with that project. So it's kind of a bad practice to name projects with the name of the release, because right now the way it happens in Rommana ALM, a given project could possibly deliver features to multiple releases. So the naming of projects this way happened in the past. All right, so let me just open any project here. It doesn't matter which one. You see a different tabs here when you open a project, because we are here in the project tab on the top, and under the project tab you have these 3 sub tabs. The project activities, there is where you can choose what you would like to do, and just putting the cursor in each one of them, it explains to you what it means and what you can do. Very simple, the user interface. People tell us all the time that user interface and the usability of Rommana ALM is amazing compared to many tools out there. So now if you move to the project dashboard, then you get to this dashboard, which you can completely configure as you wish to decide what statistics you'd like to see, and everything on this dashboard, or all the Rommana reports is clickable. So if you want to look at specific issue here, which is critical, you simply click on it and it'll open the issue right there. If you want to look at this chart or any other chart like that, if I want to see, and of course I can add any number of charts here if I want, again through the configuration here. So if I want to see those issues that are still open, I can simply click here, and these are the list of issues. If I'd like to look at any one of the issues here, I can simply click on it. So that's really what makes Rommana ALM very easy to navigate. All right, let's leave the dashboard for now. Let's move on to requirements, for example. The nice thing is that everything you can do with Rommana ALM is up here, okay, and more stuff here. Okay, so you could do testing, you can do ad hoc testing as required by the CSA. Your issues are here, but these are all the issues within this project. But later on, I'll show you how you can even look at issues that associated with a specific requirement. So let's go back here. Let me close this. Let's look at requirements. As you can see here, requirements can be functional requirements, quality requirements, and under quality requirements, you can specify anything you want, from performance to survivability to safety. And this list is very configurable. You can add any types or any category of requirement here. You can add some if you think for whatever reason security is not important for this specific project, you can remove it. And this is on a project by project basis. So the configuration, any configuration happen within the project. So you could run another project under the same site or under the same installation, and it has different configuration completely. You have hardware requirements, you may have regulations here, and so on. So all types of requirements are here, and requirements, of course, as usual, has sub-requirements to them. If I click on any requirement, you can see the details of the requirement here on a different window, and we still have this window open. So now we are looking at this specific requirement, and I hope this does not confuse you, because the requirement here is one of the requirements that was in one of the releases for Rommana ALM, configuring issue report attribute values. This is what the requirement is. Here is the requirement description, and you can put all the details here. But again, if you need more details, you got attachments here. This requirement happened not to have any attachments, but here are the models that I was talking about. And if I click here, this is the model. This is one of the models currently attached to this requirement. Let me close that because I don't want to keep too many tabs open. Okay, so you can attach any model here, and we call them documents and models because you can have a document, you can have a model, but these are associated with that specific requirement. The concept of scenario is there, so the ad hocs are here. So if, again, according to the FDA, CSA, if you have a feature, if this requirement happened to be a low risk feature, you can put ad hoc tests right here. And the ad hoc test, if you look at them, I've got a number of them here that failed, so let me click on the one that passed. Okay, it's very simple. An ad hoc test is very simple. It has a title, has a description, it has expected results, it has actual results. All this is text. Now, some people think that ad hoc testing does not require documentation. That's not true. Even in the CSA, they say that ad hoc or unscripted does not mean that there is no documentation. They just mean that the documentation would be much less. So this is how ad hoc testing is happening in Rommana ALM. If you take one of the ad hoc tests that had failed, you scroll down, it gives you here the issue report that was created because of this failure of this test case. So you can see here the status is failed. Keep in mind, if I ever try to change the status of this test case to pass, and now I try to save, Rommana ALM would not allow me to do that because there is still at least one open issue report associated with this ad hoc test. So it does not allow to pass a test case if the issue report is still open. So it tells you clearly what the methodology is requiring you to do. You need to go first and close that. So it did not change the status. I have to go back here first and I close that first. So I have to close that. Now, closing it means resolving it or deciding not to resolve it or doing whatever you want to do with it. But the status of this issue report need to be closed in order for you to pass this test case. Okay. All right, back to our requirements. It shows you the related requirements here. I have two other requirements that are related to this requirement. If I have to click here, we call them requirement groups because a requirement group really is more than one requirement. So I could establish a relationship between my current requirement and one or two or three or more other requirements, and the relationship is the same. So I have a group one of requirements here that must be developed together with this requirement. If I'm interested to see what this group, I click here and it tells me that the group is right here and there are three functional requirements. You see that? And I can change that if you want. I can say this quality requirements about safety should also be in this group because it must be developed at the same time. So I can move it here if I wanted to. Okay, now it's there. So I have now three functional requirements and I have one safety requirement. And I can save if I wanted to. Okay, let me cancel the changes I made. Yes. Okay, so these are related requirements. If you want to see all the issues associated with this requirement is right here. That's all about traceability that the FDA standards and the ISO standards require. Okay, so these are the different issues associated with this specific requirement. Now, as we said, risks are associated with requirements. I don't have, this requirement doesn't have any risks, but I can look, I can define a risk, and the risk would, as I said earlier, it would be simply anything that could possibly happen that could hinder us from delivering this requirement. So I specify the probability of this risk happening. I specify the severity. Again, the severity, like any other attribute within Rommana ALM, is configurable. You can change those values if you wish. Provide description, provide the impact, and so on. And this for now, because I'm associating with this risk with a specific requirement, it is a requirement level risk. That's what we call it. But we also have what we call project level risks, that are not associated with any requirement, but rather apply to the project as a whole. If I wanted to go into this risk and say, okay, that's not related to this requirement anymore, it affects the whole project, I can change that easily. Under the test sets here are the formal test process that has your test cases, your formal test cases, your formal test sets, and so on. And it shows you here the number of test cases in each set. This one here has 2 test cases. If I click on it, that's just one set of test cases, and it has 2 test cases down here. If you were to click on this test case, as I said earlier, a test case within Rommana ALM, and I'm talking about the formal test case. It has preconditions, it has post conditions. The preconditions are here, and the preconditions are typically anything that must be true before you can execute the test case. All right, any condition that must be true, otherwise the test case would not make much sense. And the post conditions are things that I expect to be true after the execution of the test case in order to consider the test case is a pass. All right. Some people say, is that like your expected results? Well, that's part of the expected results, because as you know, an expected results of a test case can be things you see on the screen, and we call those output, or they can be conditions. That means that things changed in the database or somewhere else. A device that was turned off, now it's turned on, whatever. So a post condition is any change in the system or the state of the system as a result of executing the test case, such that the test case passes. And of course, here we have the actual post conditions. Of course, ideally, your actual post conditions should be the same as post conditions that you expect, and in this case, the test case would pass. Now, of course, if you have your post conditions here and you executed the test case and all post conditions are the same, the actuals are the same as expected, then you don't have to write them here. I mean, we suggest that you write them here only if post conditions are different from this, because you're going to come back and define and declare this test case as a fail. And if the test case is failing, someone like this one, someone has to say, okay, well, why did you fail this test case? Is it a difference in the output, or is it a difference in the post conditions? So this makes more sense only when the test case is a fail. By the way, formal test case is not different from ad hoc test case in the sense that if the test case fails, you have the issue report down here. Okay. If you'd like to see the input and the output, you can certainly go to the test set in order to see that, because the test set had the script that's going to be run. That is very much what I wanted to show you today. And I hope you see how Rommana ALM supports the requirements of the FDA, the IEC, the ISO standards, especially the new guidance from FDA about the computer software assurance. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on the Rommana website sometime next week. Thank you.